Hi, Krista here, and thanks so much for joining me for this video tutorial with your Art2GO bird kit. And thank you for supporting Gallery One. I hope you went outside and got a lot of research done about birds and did a little drawing before we get started today. I have my little drawing here. I've chose to do a dove, and I just did a quick sketch so that I know what shape I'm going for. And then I'm going to show you the 10 steps to make your bird, and then I'll show you some adaptations that are also written in the booklet, but that I'll just show you how to do them a little bit. All right, so let's get started. Here are the tools that came with your kit. We've got some slip and a brush, a little round cutter to help you with your wings if you do the additional part of the bird, fork for scoring or scratching up to attach, a couple of different wood tools. Use them both ends, however you'd like, just to give you some different lines and textures for feathers, and then a tiny rolling pin. And we've also got these rye seeds for another adaptation at the end. And then you've got your canvas denim to work on your tabletop so it doesn't get stuck. And then of course the clay. Make sure you keep your clay in the bag unless you're working with it. And let's get started with step number 1. I'm going to take out my clay and take off part of it because I want to make sure I have enough clay for adding the head and the tail and the wings. So the directions say that we need about a tennis ball or kiwi sized piece of clay. So I'm just taking a little bit off. And if you know how to wedge and you'd like to wedge, you can stand up and wedge. I'm gonna just do a little bit of wedging on my clay to get it ready and get all the air bubbles out of it. And then get to work. So I like to pat my ball into a nice oblong egg shape or kiwi shape to get started. And any cracks on the surface you want to smooth out with your fingers to make sure that these cracks don't open up. Because clay has a memory and it remembers everything, and it remembers it much better if you don't take the time to smooth things out. All right, so my ball is all ready. So then I'm ready for step number 2, which is you are going to make an opening with your thumb by pressing it into the clay, and you're gonna leave 1/4 of an inch down at the bottom. So my thumb is really far in the clay, and I put it in lengthwise into the kiwi so that I have a nice tall pinch pot that I'm gonna start with. So now we're gonna reach all the way down to start making our pinch pot and pinching with our fingers together, trying to not make a lot of impressions with our fingers. Pinching softly, we're not trying to hurt the clay, we're just moving it a little bit at a time. And we are trying to make walls that are about 3/8 to 1/4 of an inch thick. So try and close your eyes and visualize what 3/8 or 1/4 of an inch might be in your hand. It helps to maybe do it with the hand that isn't in the clay, and then try and get your other hand to match. So we're just pinching the bottom first and getting it as close to that as we can, and then we're slowly moving up the walls. And I'm pinching by kind of pulling the clay up to make sure my pinch pot stays tall. Just pinching and turning slowly. I was noticing my own pinch marks in here and trying to go over them and make sure my walls are consistent or the same thickness all the way through. And then as I'm getting up to the top of my pinch pot, I'm making sure not to pinch out my rim too much, because this is where we're going to connect the 2 sides of the rim together to start to make our bird form. Pinching and turning, and then we are about ready. I'm pinching the rim just a little bit now, just to get it to be about 1/4 of an inch thick, so a little bit thicker than my walls. So now you can see my opening is nice and ready for step number 3. I'm just smoothing out those cracks before we move on to it. And I'm also gonna turn my piece upside down, and if my shape isn't exactly how I want it, this is when you wanna change it. So I'm gonna belly it out a little by just taking my thumb and pulling it on the inside. So I'm sort of just pulling it and pulling the clay out a little to make my pinch bowl a little bit more rounded so that I have a nice belly on my bird. And then I will set it down and move on to scratching and slipping. So we're going to scratch with our fork tool. This is also called scoring. And it's called scoring because you're making lots of little X's with the clay. And scoring is an X mark. So we're scratching that all up all the way around. And then we're going to put slip on our scratch marks. Got our clay slip. Slip is just watered down clay. So it's the same clay you're working with more water in it. Putting my slip all the way around, and then I'm ready for the next step, which is closing the form. So I'm slowly closing each side of my bowl together so that the scratch marks, like 2 sides of Velcro, line up and squish out the slip. And then we're gonna close it all the way to the edge. And then I'll set it down and I'll go back over it with my scratchy tool to mend it together. And then we're gonna take some of our extra clay and make a nice earthworm size coil to run along the top to make sure our seam is extra strong. So I'm putting my earthworm size coil down. And I made a little bit extra, so I'll just put that extra back in the bag, keep it wet and ready to work with. And then I'm just gonna go over and squish that down a little bit more and then smooth it out into the body of my bird. You're probably like, how? I still don't see the bird, Krista. Well, I'll show you in the next step. This is where we'll start to really see our birds come into themselves. So just smoothing that and making it go into the body. And now I can start to look at my little empanada that I have made, and I'm gonna start sort of looking at each end and see which one might look like a tail and which one looks like a head. I think that this one that's a little bit bigger will be a nice head for my bird, and this one that's a little bit smaller is gonna be a nice tail. So I'm going to set my piece down so that I'm creating a bottom. And I set mine down so that it's kind of perched up, but you can set yours down like this so that it's reaching its tail out, however you'd like. Just following my drawing. And then I'm also gonna start to define the tail and sort of square or point it off. I'm gonna give mine a little square tail. You can see that. So just smoothing what clay is there. And then I'm going to define where my head, so I'm gonna make some shoulders where the wings go in. And then the clay that's a little bit extra, I'm gonna just push it down so that now I have this nice head starting to form. And then if you need a little extra clay, if you don't have enough for your beak, you can always scratch and slip some on. So now I have this lovely bird form that I've started to make. It looks like a bird now, right? I'm hoping yours does too. And we can grab some of the things you might have collected from your kitchen. I like to use a wooden spoon. They're really nice for sort of paddling the form, since we have this air trapped inside, we can kind of manipulate the piece by just paddling a little and make our belly of our bird more defined. And kind of smooth out some of our pinch marks. All right, we are done with that. So now I'm ready to keep going with all of my details on my bird. So now is the time for all of my cool wood tools or any other texture tools you found around your house. So I'm gonna go in with those, start to make my tail feathers. I like to use lines for those. I'm gonna define my wings that are on here. On each side. And I'm gonna start using the ends of some of my tools to make my feather marks. So I really like to use these ones to make these nice feather marks running all along the piece, and then long feather marks, sort of combining different textures to create a dynamic surface on my bird. And I can go in with some other tools that are a little bit smaller feathers so that they're layered and look more complex. And do the same on the other side as well. And then I can go in with my eye tool and sort of just poke in and make your little eye. And I can start to define my beak by just going in with this straight edge tool. Define my beak. Maybe you just need to pinch it a little. And then go in and make your other lines and your little nose holes. All right, and I'll put my eye on the other side, make sure it matches with the other one, or if it doesn't, that's okay too. All right, and then I can keep putting feathers all along the back. And on my other wing. And my other feathers. All right, so I'm all done with my bird. And when you're all done with your bird, you'll need to flip it over and write your name. So I'm gonna write my name, Crista. And then I'm gonna put a punctured hole into it because right now there's air trapped inside your bird, and you wanna make sure that that air gets out while it's firing, otherwise your bird could pop in the kiln like a balloon because the air has nowhere to go unless you have a hole. And then also put what glaze method you're going to use. So I am going to put my glaze method with the number that coordinates with it and then circle that. And now my bird is done, so I can take it to Gallery 1 and put it on the shelf. And then Crista, the tech there, that's me, I will fire your bird for you. And then whatever glaze method you decided, if you decided you want me to glaze it, I'll take care of it and I'll glaze it for you. And then you can come pick it up. Or you can come in on Tuesday if you wrote that as your option. And I'll show you what glazes to use, and we'll practice social distancing and masking, and you can glaze your bird yourself, whatever colors you'd like. Or you can choose no glaze, and you can paint it with acrylic and paint and whatever you'd like. So if this was a little too you want to keep going with this and you'd like to make a bird that's a little more complicated, you can always add wings. So I'll show you how to do that now. So maybe your wings, you want your wings to come out. So if you have a small bird, you can use the circle cut, but you're first going to start off by just rolling out some clay with your rolling pin from the kit. So I'm just rolling out a little slab of clay. I want it to be 1/4 inch thick. Here's my slab. It's nice and it's got some thickness to it. And then I'm going to either freehand my wings by drawing them out, or use the cookie cutter if I have a smaller bird, and then cut the circle in half. I'm going to freehand mine to show you how you can add 1 wing, because that's all the time we have. So I'm going to cut out my wing, and then I'm going to decide where it's going to go on here. I want it to go right about there, sort of sticking out. So I'm going to smooth in some of my other details, and I'm going to trace where I want to scratch, slip, and attach this part of the wing, because we have to scratch, slip, and attach, otherwise the wing will fall off. So I'm just scratching where I'm going to attach the wing and what I'm attaching to, and then I'll put down some slip. And then I can push that on. And now I've got a wing that's sticking out, so it can be kind of flying. And you can pinch the edges of that out. You want to make sure this is really well on. You might even need to scratch down the seam area where it comes into the body and add a little coil of clay to help with that. So now it's got a nice connection into the body, and I can integrate some of my decorations. So now it looks like my bird's just about to fly off the ground. It's got this nice wings sticking out. So I'll add in my texture. Notice I have to support it with my hand behind it, or my thumb. And then I can add in all of my other feathers up here and make it more seamless, moving in to the body of the bird. And then work on doing the feathers of the breast of the bird or the front, so that that all comes together. All right, so now that we've got our alternative for the bird, that's alternative number 1, we also have alternative number 2, which is if making a pinch pot was too hard and you're not up for it today, that's totally fine. You can make a solid bird. So let's pretend that my bird, I made it solid. So solid just means that you don't cut anything. So I'll make a little bird that's solid real quick. So I'll just create a little front to it and a little tail. So I've got this little bird with its little eyes, and it's ready. So this is one adaptation. You can then go through all the other steps with how to do your beak and your tail feathers, and you can add on wings if you'd like. But because it's solid, I can't fire it in the kiln. So you get to do an extra special step with this rye seeds that are in the packet, and you can put your rye seeds onto your bird. So I'm just pouring them out here. They might fall off a little. You gotta kind of plant them in the clay. So let's roll it around in there. Maybe get some in your hand. Works really well if you do it that way. Kind of like push it in from your hand. And now you've got grass seed that will spring from your bird, so you'll want to keep it hydrated for the next week. You can either keep it in a little plastic bag and spray it with water, or you can put it in a cool, sort of damp area in your garden that doesn't get too damp, so that the clay will start to slake before the seed grows. So this is just a really fun way to engage with outside, and then the bird will sprout the grass, and then the clay will start to disintegrate into the ground. So talking about how where clay comes from and putting it back into the earth, but also making a natural object out of it. So that was making birds. We've got our first version of the bird. We've got the addition of the wing for an alternative, and then we've also got our second alternative building, which is solid, and then making a sprouting sculpture to put in your garden. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great time making birds, and I can't wait to see each of your pieces. Have a wonderful summer, and I hope to see you next year. Bye.